The money's gone. The money was stolen. The country is in an absolute catastrophe. There's an awful lot of mixing of people in Syria who have never mixed before. And the sense that, yes, they are in control, but what are they going to do? There's also apprehension as well as joy.
The people were today and yesterday printing the photo of al-Julani, not because they loving him, but this is the way how they learn that from al-Assad.
You just back the winner.
To say that we're protected somehow.
A mafia family ran this country for 50 years. So basically, this is a narco-state. So it has no economy and totally corrupted institutions in as much as they were. And you're more or less starting from scratch.
Hello and welcome to the Forecast. I'm Krishnan Guru-Murthy and we are in Damascus. I'm with our international editor, Lindsey Hilsum, and with Fuad Sayed Issa, who is the director of the aid agency Violet, which has been operating in the north but has now come to Damascus after the revolution. So we are now a few days into these jaw-dropping events in Syria, and we wanted to try and talk about where we are now and where we might be heading. I mean, in terms of what's going on in the country, give us some sort of overview, because there is still a lot of activity going on in the north. You know, the war is not over everywhere.
Absolutely not. And so you've got two outside players. You've got the Israelis who've been bombing certain facilities because they say they don't want weapons to fall into the hands of the extremists. Well, some people say that's the reason, and other people say it's because they want to make sure that Syria is always weak. And they've taken what they're calling a temporary buffer zone to try and prevent trouble spilling over the border. And then you've got Turkey, which has a historic enmity with the Kurds who control northeast Syria. And they have also been bombing. And my understanding is that there has been, some people are being displaced in the northeast because of continued fighting. And we're hearing, the town of Deir ez-Zor has now fallen to what we were calling Hay'at Tahrir al-Sham, this rebel group, and now they're calling themselves a transitional government. So, I'm not quite sure what we call it now. So there's that going on. And then the other thing that's going on is that you have all these fighters from Idlib, which is the area that HTS was controlling, who have now come into Damascus and into all the other cities. And, they're country boys. They're country boys in uniform. And this is a big city. And it's very different from what they're used to. And as you said, to us, they're friendly. And what I understand from people I've been speaking to is that they're friendly to everyone else. But there's a whole load but they are Islamists. There's an awful lot of mixing of people in Syria who have never mixed before. And the sense that, yes, they are in control, but what are they going to do? There's also apprehension as well as joy.
Also, there is a big worry from our side as an organization about the services, because, now they are trying to run the services, but as we understand from the government, there is no any resources now to run this government.
Yes.
Because all the resources, the money, the dollar, the other things were stolen before arriving from Bashar Al-Assad and the old government. And now there is no any resources.
Yes, because at the moment, I suppose the reasonably hopeful thing is that the civil servants, if you like, have stayed. They haven't been sacked. They haven't run away. So the government departments should still function if they can find a way of paying them and keeping them on the payroll. Now, you met one of the people now in charge of one of these ministries.
Yeah, so just before I talk about that, let's just say one thing. We've been talking about, the present, which is the joy, and the future, which is the apprehension. Let's just quickly talk about the past, which is the prisoners, because, this is obviously one of the biggest things, is that some people are full of joy, but there are a lot of people crying as well. The people who've been to the prisons and found out their son, their husband, their sister was tortured, was murdered. And that, that goes through everything. It goes through everything, because there's scarcely a family that hasn't been touched by the utter cruelty of the Assad regime. And so one of the first demands is justice. And if they don't have a functioning justice system, there will be revenge. There may be revenge anyway. There may be revenge which is already happening that we don't know about, that going on in sort of corners
That's
of the...
happened, actually.
It's already happening,
We heard some incidents happen. It's still small numbers, but as you said, like the people need the justice, because you can imagine that someone killed your children and he's back living in the same building where you are, and you cannot do anything because there is like no fighting decision. But you need your justice in the end, and then this is the hard
There have
feel.
been some incidents.
We heard that people are not waiting because they need the justice right now.
And that's
they
what,
have weapons.
That's right. And
then
this guy I met yesterday, he's the Deputy Minister of Administration. His name is Mohammed Yasser Khazal. Very good English. He was an HTS fighter, and then he was the administrator of Idlib. So he has a lot of experience, because Idlib, which was a rebel-held enclave, about 4 million people. That's a small country, it's not nothing. But we found him yesterday. It was extraordinary. We went into the Damascus governorate, and you have this incredible scene where all the civil servants, as you were saying, have come back to see if they can get their job back. The answer at the moment is yes. But some of them have... So how did you get a job in the Assad regime? Well, you got a job if you were a member of somebody's family, or if you paid a bribe or whatever. And there's a lot of ridiculous jobs. And when I spoke to Mr. Khazal, he said, it was interesting. We had the formal interview, and at the end he said, look, can I ask you a question? He said, let me tell you a few things. And one of the things was, he said, look, the big people, they've fled. They fled, we're not going to get them. And what we're dealing with here are the middle level people. And he said, and there are some technocrats and people who, could be said, there's all these other people. What are we going to do with them? He said, well, some of them have potential and maybe we can retrain and so on, but an awful lot of them, they were just, this was
Didn't really do anything, yes.
Yeah, this was an old sort of make-work communist system. And the other thing which was fascinating, he said to me, so what should we do to try and get the recognition and the acknowledgement from the British government, the American government, and so on? Very practical man, very aware of exactly what you've been talking about, making the water work, making the electricity work so we don't have all these power cuts, trying to do all the sensible, normal things that people need. He said, this place is like North Korea, he said. You have to make it into a proper country again, because they know perfectly well the money's gone. The money was stolen. The country is in, as he said, it's an absolute catastrophe.
I mean, Fuad, you've worked with these guys in the north with your organisation, so you know them reasonably well. I mean, there is an obvious fear in Europe and America that this is in some way like the Taliban. That they want an Islamist state, that they are radicals, but they're not, are they? I mean, in that sense, it's not. They don't want that kind of country here, do they?
I think, to be honest, I think they are mostly from Islamic background, as we are in Islamic country. But I think they are thinking in a very big way, thinking to have a very great relation with the international countries.
That's what I mean, in terms of their ambition. Their ambition is not the same as the Taliban or ISIS.
I didn't get that impression at all, but presumably there will be different strands of thought amongst the different groups who are now coming together in this Salvation Government. And I'm sure there are some who are much more that way inclined than others. So the people we're meeting at the moment are, full of this, that, yes, women will be free to wear what they want, and no, we are not going to oppress the Alawites and the Christians. But there's going to be some people in there who think differently. And I suppose, now is this moment of unity, but how long, I remember Libya, it was all joy and happiness, until someone lost an eye. You get different people, and you're going to get different groups who will have a different vision for the country.
And that worries why the Syrian are trying to do the unity together, to not losing the control or losing the message, the great message that they are spreading now. The message, I think it's good for the most of Syrian now.
Yeah.
What they are saying, how they are acting, that's important. But when there is a moment we could lose all of that. And I think the big worry is for them is not the Syrian, is the international world and how they can build a relation with this government.
This is the great danger, though, it seems to me, Lindsey, isn't it? That governments they're waiting to see what this is. And the truth is, you don't really have time in deciding whether or not to engage with this government, because if you don't, then who knows what will happen.
Well, look, that's exactly true. But you've got Gulf countries, and I think this is what's really important, because I suspect that the British, the Americans, the French are all going to dither, because that's what they tend to do.
Because they're still banned at the moment.
Yeah, all these people, Julani, who's no longer called Julani, who is the head of
al-Sham now, yes.
Right, he's the head of this Salvation government. He's on the terrorism list. I'm not actually quite sure how you get off the terrorism list. I don't really know what the mechanism for that is, and that's going to be an issue. But there's a lot of money in the Gulf, the Saudis, the Qataris, the UAE. There is a way in which money can come into this country for paying the salaries and for reconstruction that doesn't have to go through Western countries. But then, look, I don't want to be Cassandra. I hate that role. But
sort of your job.
It is my job to be Cassandra, yes, Lindsey, Cassandra Hilsum. My fear also is that if a lot of money comes in, that's when you get corruption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult. You've got all these people who've been poor for so long. This country's been under sanctions. I was talking to a fighter yesterday when we were wandering around Bashar Al-Assad's palace, which has been picked clean, looting, which is, righting a historical wrong. And he was saying, they were living in luxury while we were being bombed in tents. Absolutely true. Money starts to come in. Your family is living in the most appalling conditions and you don't really have enough to eat. And then you get a little bit more and you want a little bit more and you want a better life. We've seen it in so many places. Reconstruction money breeds corruption. And it's inevitable you're going to have some of that. But how you keep a lid on that, I don't really know.
But if I can also, speak about our experience with them, with this government before, because we worked with them in the area for 3-4 years.
Am I being too downbeat?
We worked with them for long, and we didn't hear any big corruption happened in the area from this government, because they were focusing on their goals. They were focusing on having free Syria. But as you said, could be different when the money came,
it's
when
temptation.
You get the control on the whole Syria. But because also that sometimes helps, because they have a values and they are believing in their values.
And that's the Islamism. That's the positive side.
Exactly. Yeah. That pushing them all the time to be aware from getting any money, not in the good way or the right way.
The other thing, where there are unrealistic expectations is the political process. Now, at the moment, they're a transitional government. They're suggesting we'll just be a transitional government for a small number of months, and then we'll create, a process and institutions and the expectation of some sort of, democratic process. It's going to take a long time.
Look, it really is. And one of the things that sort of annoys me about Western governments in these kind of situations is they're saying, right, you have to have elections. What a lovely thing elections are. How can you have elections in the short term when you've got, 14 million Syrians who are forced into exile, refugees? What would be the mechanism for them to vote? Some are coming back, some aren't, and so on. And
who do they vote for? There are no political parties.
There are no political parties.
And just to say something, if I can add,
yes,
if you see the street, the people were today and yesterday printing the photo of al-Julani, al-Shari, and having it, not because they loving him, but this is the way how they learn that from Al-Assad.
You just back the
winner.
So to say that we're protected somehow. And we are the people who came from the Rapples area and from Idlib. We're saying no one in Idlib do that. No one having his photo. He did the work. And
that's very interesting.
It really is. And so,
but they were acting like that with Al-Assad regime, with Al-Assad for 14 years. And now they think that the only way to
be safe.
And that's the mentality. I'm sorry to be, a boring old fart, but this just makes me think of something from 2003, where the day Saddam Hussein fell and the Americans came into town. I just remember the American tanks coming in, and there's a group of people, and what they had always done was they had jumped up and down and shouted in Arabic, "Oh Saddam, we redeem you with our blood and spirit. We redeem you, oh Saddam." And then they and then they saw the tank and they saw us and they go, "Oh George Bush, we redeem you with our blood and our spirit."
I mean,
that's
the
Ba'ath
reality.
Party thinking, isn't it?
From the first hour we arrived to some cities in Homs and Damascus, they were saying "بنروح بالدم نفديك جولاني."
Yes.
Like in blood we're...
It's the same one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for Jolani, they don't know him. Who's Jolani?
Yeah,
and what
but
he's
that's
coming
what
to
you
do,
learn.
what the things. Then, I mean, that's why it's not easy. It's like the message for the UK, US, and the other government. It's not the way to just push for democracy in a very fast way without thinking about the reality here. The people didn't have any parties from 45 years.
Yes.
And didn't join any politicals out of al-Ba'ath party. They didn't know how the government, the people in the world, like acting and living
or
the
what the political choice may be. You know, you got to build those arguments, those groups,
and
those thoughts.
And those institutions, first of all. Because what are people talking about? Justice and dignity. That's what people want, justice and dignity. Oh, and water and electricity. But I think it's this issue because the Syrian, I think there's more state, more of a Syrian state than there was of a Libyan state. But we're still talking about a mafia family that ran this country for 50 years. And in recent years, ran it on the drugs trade, Captagon. So basically, this is a narco-state. So it has no economy and totally corrupted institutions in as much as they were. So that has to be the priority. And you're more or less starting from scratch, aren't you?
And it's going to be difficult for them to just close all of that down, isn't it? Because it's a source of revenue.
If I can say also, the organization, when we came here, we don't have resources to work in this huge city. And we were trying to visit the big humanitarian organization here. And the whole big organization, the leaders were lifting because all of them were affiliated with Assad fully, or also part of his family or something. Then this is the organization and the humanitarian sector. What about the ministers? What about the money, the businesses, and other things? I think the focusing should be now in the first months. And as I said, I mean, is the services, the civil services, electric, water, and humanitarian aids, and what needed for the people, and then working on the political side just to do some awareness. The other way is just also having the Syrian rebels and the Syrian opposition from outside of Syria, because we have big, we can say, resources from the Syrian who was living in diaspora for 45 years.
They need
or
to come
unless
back.
For 20. They should come back. They should be an important part from this government because they are acceptable. They are welcomed, and they need to put their resources now. It's the national time for all of us, for all of Syrian. Everyone have resources to be here in Damascus and to work either with government, either with establishing new political things or parties. But it's the time for all nationals people, Syrian people, to be here and to act hand in hand to build this country.
But there will be a natural caution, won't there, of people saying, well, is now the time to go back, or do I need to wait?
I think
it's a catch-22.
Yes, but most Syrians I know are desperate to come home. They really want to come home. And there has been a lot of work done with sort of government in exile and people trying to build up the skills and so on that they need. And for the last 13 years, people have been thinking about this moment in the diaspora, and they've been thinking about what they can contribute when they come home. So I do think that there are many Syrians of goodwill who want to come back and build their country. But I just hope that the Western countries don't push them into the political divisions too early on, because I think that could be very destructive.
I was at the shrine yesterday to the Prophet's granddaughter. It was very interesting. And a young man came up to me and wanted to chat. And he said, we were talking about why people were so afraid of the revolution in their community, the Shia community.
Yeah.
And he said, look, he was a student. He's currently a student at university. He says, even at university, in our first year, we had a course we had to take compulsorily called national culture. And in that we were taught that a revolution would be a disaster. These were terrorists, they would come and kill us, and it would be the end of everything. And he was just having that awakening of saying, you know, it was all wrong, you know. So there's a lot to kind of shift in the way people are thinking. He was stepping into this shrine, which was now being guarded by HTS fighters, you know, Sunni fighters guarding a Iranian-built Shia shrine.
That's right. I think that was like the system are just now we are trying to understand how they was controlling this country for 45 years.
Yeah.
When I was 16 or 15 also, when the revolution started in 2011, I was in my school, the high school, and then we was like when the Arab Spring started, we were discussing what could happen in Syria and how we can act. We were children like in that day. And I was arrested for 2 days because just we were discussing something. As a children, we were worried all the time how we can continue our studying. And they were saying that you're not able to get to the university if you're not part of Hizb al-Ba'ath.
Yeah.
Al-Ba'ath party. And
Yeah.
I mean, as a children, we were shocked, like, what is that? What's happening here? And when we got arrested, we understand that it's not a joke, like it's sensitive things also as a children. And it was crazy when I born and also had all of my life in Syria. But then when I went out to the Western countries and to the whole countries, I felt that we were in just kind of series or something, film or something, how they control us and how they close our eyes in Syria for all of these years. And we thought that this is the right. The right is not talking about the political, the right is not being part of any like activity, also civil society things. And you should just get like a photo for Bashar al-Assad and put it on ahead of your
But so many Syrian families now have relatives overseas, and of course you have had the internet. And so although you do still have that sort of mindset, there are lots of people who, you know, have had so many different experiences now within their families that I think that you know, that can change quite quickly. Do you think?
I think so, but you know what? When the revolution started in 2011, when as a children we were joining this like marching, the only one who was saying from our families, I mean, my family were also part of like the revolution in the 18s, and many of our like my uncles, they were arrested for 35 years, and those people were the only one who say to us, "You're not allowed to do that. Don't do any revolution." And we were like with the energy as a youth to do something, and they were just, I mean, fighting us to not do anything.
Because they were so afraid for you.
Because they're afraid, because they have the whole life in the present. And they were like just tens of people, instead of us saying, don't do anything. You don't know the reality. You don't know what's going on. And we were saying like, you are the people who is affecting from that. You should push us to do that.
It'd be good to talk to them now, wouldn't it?
That's why it's again, in this 13 years, when the people under the Assad control, the areas of Assad control, they were worried of saying any single word. When you see your brother getting to the president, for having $100 in your pocket money, or so saying a word, and then being without any news for 10 years, in a like arrested for 10 years, then what to do? Thinking about politicals or saying something? Just stuck on house and eat water.
Yeah.
Electric is the best what you thinking about if you can get that. And till this day, like now, no Assad, no country, governments, no one. And then still the people are afraid from getting dollar or also saying any word. They saying when the incidents happened, they're not saying the revolution word till this day because they are afraid from saying the words of revolution. Then that's why I think it's a huge changing in the country, but it could take a time. It's not a quick changing, and the services and the government think it will be very risky if especially the Western countries didn't decide to go and support the Syrian in this sensitive time.
Well, it's just the beginning. It's fascinating, and it's an amazingly exciting thing to watch. I have to say, I mean, it's a privilege, I think, to see.
We're very lucky to be here with you.
We're lucky to be part of this revolution. We're now building our future. We'll be building the new Syria, and it's the time to get the support from the whole countries, from the whole free people who's believing on us and who's believing that the Syria worth it and could have a better future.
Thank you very much indeed. That's the forecast for now. Until next time, bye-bye.